Right. Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of our show, True Data Ops. I'm your host, Kent Graziano, the Data Warrior. Each week, we're going to bring you podcasts covering all things data ops with the people who are making data ops what it is today. So, our very special guest today is my good friend, Justin Mullen, the CEO and co-founder of DataOps.live and the co-author of the book DataOps For Dummies. Welcome to the show, Justin, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Kent. I thought you were never going to invite me on this show, but delighted to be on it at last. I've been waiting for ages for the introduction.
Yeah, well, glad we could finally make this happen, and a great way to start off 2023 by having you on the show.
Fantastic. Looking forward to it.
All right. Well, to get us started, not everybody who's watching the show or listening to us on the podcast may know as much about you as I do. So why don't you give us a little bit of your background here?
Yeah, sure. So, look, I've been a tech guy for all of my life. So, did computers at university and loved that and came out and in fact stayed over. I'd moved over from Ireland into the UK and then stayed over in the UK and started working for a software company that was right beside IBM's head offices, right down in Portsmouth in the south of England. So directly opposite them, and it was great fun, and it was a small software house. So I learned so much in those early stages. And I suppose I've been through sort of three main sort of phases in my growth and in my career. So I think the first of those was all around sort of IT systems and data. So did a lot of work in the early days. I don't know if you remember way back whenever there was help desk and IT management and Remedy and Peregrine, Kent, and all of those things. And I did a ton of work around that and network monitoring and HP and BMC and all of that. And I tended to get always involved in the data side around that. So how to pull all of this data together, how to aggregate it, and building a lot of the data marts that we reported off the back of, to understand what was going on then. I then spent, that was about 10 years. I then spent about another 10 years in workflow and business process automation. So heavily into a lot of workflow around Microsoft stack at that stage, got very heavily into the Microsoft ecosystem, got involved in SSIS and BizTalk and SQL Server, data warehousing, and a lot of the stuff around that. So heavily into data management around sort of business processes and analyzing performance. And then the last 10 years been really into what I would sort of sometimes refer to as hardcore data, which is just true proper big data. So I've done that for, got involved with Talent way back in 2012, which was fantastic, and did a lot of work on building systems for big customers around Talent and Hadoop and Vertica. And then someone introduced me to a small database company in 2017 called Snowflake, and told me this is going to be the best thing since sliced bread and the next biggest thing. And honestly, it took us about a month to realize it was going to be that, and we became the first Snowflake partner in EMEA at that stage. So it was great. So 30 odd years in data or in and around data. So I'm a lot older than I look, Kent.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you're holding up pretty well there, Justin.
I'm holding up pretty well.
Yeah, that's pretty good. So let's talk about a little more history here, and tell everyone how this idea for a cloud-based data ops platform came about.
Well, you probably know more than anyone. So you were involved in a lot of the in the early stages. I suppose it came about as a mixture of things. It came about from we became the first partner of Snowflake in EMEA, and we started doing a lot of the early deployments. And we because we were doing
that was for folks that don't know, that was under the company name Datalytics.
Datalytics, that's right. And you remember you, me, Sam Hopper, we did the very first zero to Snowflake in 90 minutes and all of that.
In London, yes. Yeah.
In London, that's right.
It's my second trip to London.
Your second trip to London. And so we started doing a lot of that. And as we dealt with more and more customers, we started saying, how can we build repeatability into this? How can we accelerate their time to value? How can we enable them not just to get to value, but then to repeat and maintain that value, doing more and more stuff over and over again? And how can we remove some of the barriers to success? And I think if we then sort of look forward, we started talking about data ops and that repeatability in the lobby of the Marriott Hotel, if you remember, over in San Mateo. You, me, Guy had joined us. Guy Adams had joined us at that stage as our CTO, and Guy had been visiting a lot of these ideas, and he lit a fire under the whole thing. He lit a fire under it in terms of his 20 years background in DevOps and CI/CD, and started asking some really serious questions. Why can't we just do this again? Why can't we bring DevOps and CI/CD to data? And that was sort of the start of the whole idea. That was the start of, how can we bring it? How can we bring that repeatability to it? We realized it was called data ops. Realized everyone was misusing the term data ops all over the industry and sort of just applying it to whatever they thought was data operations or whatever, but it wasn't the true essence of DevOps for data. And so we then coined we came up with the idea for the philosophy, and we wrote the philosophy. As you remember, you participated in it, true data ops and the 7 pillars, and true data ops, to make sure it was different from what everyone else was misusing. And then the platform came after that, which is like, how do we do it and how do we build that CI/CD process? So that's where the idea and where everything came from.
Yeah. So really it was a couple of things that, I remember you guys asking me, so what are you hearing from customers? What's one of the things that, is there anything big that seems to be missing from, I'll say, the native Snowflake platform? And the number one request I kept getting was CI/CD. Is like, how do we do CI/CD with data, right?
Yeah.
I think previously I'd written a blog post about I called it Agile DevOps. I didn't know about DataOps at the time. Agile DevOps with Snowflake using zero copy clone.
Yeah.
And that was something Steve Herskovitz, who was the VP of sales engineering at the time, he and I had worked out, what are the steps? How can we actually really use this? People had not thought about necessarily using zero copy clone in change control, right? And in development, they thought about, we can copy it and then we can run some tests. We do sandboxes for data science people. But the idea that we could use zero copy clone to create a dev environment and a QA environment, and then how would you promote things from one to the other? That was, very early on, and that sort of fed into all this.
And that was the fundamental capability, Kent, that made it possible. That zero copy clone that you'd identified in this Agile DevOps was a capability that made it possible for us to even think about, how do we do a feature branch of our code? And how do we do a feature branch of our database to align with our code at the same time? And no one else had that feature, no one else had that capability. And to be, largely, no one really still has the extent of the capability that's in zero copy clone and Snowflake even today. They've got different elements, so you can clone different areas of tables or individual portions, but not that core capability. And that's what made true data ops possible. It was Snowflake, that zero copy clone. And then what we had to do was then think about, right, what are all of the other core principles of DevOps? What were those battle hardened ones? As Guy used to always say, how do we bring everything from DevOps and then only change the things that are absolutely critical to change for data? And that's what we embarked on, and that's what we've delivered over the last 3.5, 4 years.
Yeah, and I think the like you said, the zero copy clone was kind of it was one of those aha moments, right? That we all had. Is like, we can't really to do it in any other platform other than Snowflake would be hugely expensive, because nobody did have that zero copy clone. People for years, I mean, you and I had done that for decades, basically, trying to do that with data warehouses. Like, hey, we need a bigger dev instance, we need a bigger QA instance. And it was like, we can't afford it, right? So we could never really do that. But then,
go on.
And then you've got with that capability, though, one of the other keys, though, that comes into the pillars of true data ops and the approach was governance. Is how do you govern this? How do you make sure that only certain people are able to copy that production data and keep track of it and keep track of the branches and the merging, and not just have people just kind of willy-nilly moving things around, which they would have done with the scripts that I wrote, because I had no governance in there at all. It was just here's how you do it fundamentally. Who gets to do it? That was like something I hadn't really thought about.
And that governance element was in large part, if you look at, just taking Snowflake as the core platform, a lot of those governance capabilities were built into Snowflake. There was a lot of strength in terms of the way in which you apply security and controls and policies and all of those things. But what we had to do is we had this, the zero copy clone was one element of it, but actually what we also had to do was step back and say, right, in the building of a data product, and that's a key element that we must discuss. What in the building of a data product on Snowflake, we need to be able to manage and orchestrate and automate in a programmatic way the building and the rebuilding of every single object in Snowflake. How do we not only build tables and views and materialized views, but how do we manage and lifecycle manage the 35 odd other objects that exist in Snowflake, and how do we enable them so that we can do it in a declarative fashion? So every time we build a data platform, then it checks the source of truth, it checks the target, and it'll only do what the differences are. And if there's no differences, it'll do nothing. And that was a very, very core element, and Snowflake was, leading the way on making the programmatic management of its entire, of the entire Snowflake cloud possible with its APIs and everything else. And that's really what, we tapped into. And, if we take it back out of, just what we've done in DataOps, that's core to true DataOps, regardless of whether it's us or anything, organizations need to be selecting tools that are able to control and manage all of those elements of a cloud data platform.
Yeah, because one of the principles, of course, is trying to be more agile, and that's what everybody wants to do. And if you have certain parts automated and tracked, but other parts aren't automated and tracked, it's a lot harder to move quickly, and you run that risk of, in the, I'll say, the CI/CD world, continuous integration, continuous development, of potentially not doing a full deployment because there was a couple of objects that you hadn't tracked. You're just running manual scripts. It's like, okay, we can push a button and we can get all this to happen, but then somebody still has to go run a set of scripts to finish it out. And that was one of the things that I know you guys were trying to make sure that wasn't going to be the case, that with your platform, that it's all encompassing, like you said, all of the objects that somebody could be changing and adding in a Snowflake environment are all covered in DataOps.live, and they're all governed as well, which is, I think that's one of the keys that gets left out a lot is, are we governing all of the components in the life cycle, not just, okay, we've got the code in Git, right? Okay, great. So we got all the DDL over in Git, but what about like you said, the data? What about the, stored procedures? What about streams and tasks? All of these other things that are in Snowflake. Yeah.
Yeah. No, sorry, go on ahead.
Yeah. So want to go back to something you said earlier. You're talking about, kind of got the basic idea, and Guy brought a lot to the table with his experience in DevOps, but then we got into defining what the real vision was, and that's kind of where this idea of true data ops came from, right?
Right. Yeah. What is it? If you think about that vision, the vision is, why are we? Remember, but there was a new paradigm that also had changed over that time. When we were back in 2019, we stopped talking about data projects and we started talking about data products. And we started talking about the fact that we shouldn't be defining. We had spent years delivering projects to numerous big organizations. Many of, I can't name them, but everyone would know them. And it was always about delivering the project and delivering the platform and delivering the data warehouse. Okay. And that was not, while that was the end goal, that was no good to the business. The business needed something else. It didn't care how it was getting delivered. It needed data products. It needed an end functional element, a data mart or a share of data or whatever to be built. And so we started talking about these data products, and then thinking about that. Then it brings the whole thing of, well, if we're building data products, how do we build and how do we lifecycle manage them? How do we treat them like a product over their entire lifetime? So not how do we just build them once, and how do we build them in a very complicated ecosystem which has many tools as part of it, Fivetran and Matillion and DataIQ and Monte Carlo and all of these different things that exist in that ecosystem, of which data will be flowing through and from and to any one of them, and through Snowflake and DBT and various other things as well. But how do we manage those as products? How do we continue to manage them as changes come to those products over time? And so that brought in the whole concept of what that brought to true data ops is the vision of, we need to bring everything that's worked in software development that allowed us to do DevOps and CI/CD and true software product lifecycle management. We needed to bring all of those elements across into the data world, so that we could truly treat an end financial services dashboard like a product, and manage every element of it and all of the changes. Because one single change to just an ingestion table has a consequence and a downstream effect of changing the Matillion job that's loading it, changing the Monte Carlo job that's running data quality tests on it, changing the transformations you might be running in DBT against the cloud, changing the data science algorithms that are applied to it, and then changing the output that you might push to both Tableau as a scorecard and maybe your Calibra data catalog. So how do you manage that change as a single atomic unit, so that you can manage a change, you can feature branch, build the change across all of those tools, and then promote those through dev, test, and prod. So coming back to your question, the vision was, how do we create that opportunity, and how do we create the ability for developers, these data product developers, to build build new changes to these pipelines and promote them through the same life cycle as we do in software development, with no barriers to them, no challenges to them, and making them highly productive as individuals. We reckon data engineers were 40 to 70% less productive than software developers. And so it's, how do we remove that 40 to 70% and make them as productive?
Right. And so with all of that, that's where we ended up with the 7 pillars of true data ops.
Correct. Yeah.
And so that then, I mean, to a certain extent, it was a theoretical thought leader exercise. Yourself, Guy, Mike Ferguson, and Wayne Eckerson, we all got together and walked through this and said, ideally, this is what we see. This is what's necessary if we're going to be successful with this approach on data. Yeah. And that then in turn has actually then driven the development of your actual platform, right?
Exactly. We started with the philosophy. We started saying, what way should it work? Okay. And then we said, right, can we build something that lives up to that philosophy? And we won't live up to every element of it, but we try to live up to every element of it. And and we were building off the back of the good work that the team at Data Kitchen had done in terms of setting out the DataOps manifesto. We set out the true data ops, and the manifesto was the what. We were defining the how. This is the way it should work. This is the way that it should operate, to be truly successful. And then we use that as our definition, as our defining sort of North Star, to say, right, now we want to build a platform to do that. and we want to build a long-term agnostic platform. But we're going to focus all of our energies on one platform and getting it right. And Snowflake was the choice for that, and that's what drove what we built today, and is what's been used by great companies like Rush, who've now up to hundreds of developers, all working the same way, building 50, 60 data products, and releasing. Here's the big thing: releasing, I think, over 120 times a month into production, and that was unheard of. A year ago, they were releasing once a quarter. Whenever you think about it, so
Yeah.
it's a phenomenal measurement and KPI in terms of, it's a true measure of agility, isn't it? Really, when you think about it, how agile are we? Well, how many times can you release to production in a month? Successfully, without failure, without having to roll back, and all of those things.
Yeah, because if you think back in the DevOps world, books like the Phoenix Project and folks that were working in that area, that was like the gold standard. Talked about Netflix and Amazon, all these massive companies, and how many times they released to production in a day. In the data world, we're like, well, yeah, if we can release something to production 6 weeks, 3 months. We remember
3 months. Good. Yeah.
we're like the 90-day data mart, right? That was like, a couple decades ago, that was the goal. It's like, can we deliver something in 90 days? Can we get down to 90 days?
That was considered really good. That was considered really good.
Previously, it was years, right?
Yeah.
I think you'd go on, building an enterprise data warehouse, and it might be a 2.5-year project before anybody saw anything. And so this idea of, kind of merging agile with data warehousing, it's like, can we deliver something in 90 days? That was our first goal. And then it got down to, okay, how about, something in a month, maybe 4 to 6 weeks. And then we get down to talking about 2-week sprints. It's like, can we do something in 2 weeks? And while many of us managed to do those sorts of things, so lots of little pieces like what we're talking about in the DataOps stuff might not have been there. It might have been manual, and you had to have a crack team, right? If you had a crack team, you could do it, right? Yeah. But if you had a new team or a growing organization, or as we've seen in the last 5 years, data is just coming from everywhere, and it's coming so much faster. And then you throw in stuff like data sharing. It's like, holy cow, you can't have that many expert data engineers to keep up with the pace. And that's kind of where the data ops thing comes in, and trying to have a platform to help. And talking about Rush, I'd like to say Rush is a great example. OneWeb was another one, which we're going to hear from Rush in another week or so, and we heard from OneWeb a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, we had Miguel on. But
and you've got Paul coming on as well, I think, haven't you?
Yeah. Paul's coming on shortly. So I guess one of the, it's kind of a leading question, but step back from your CEO of DataOps.live hat for a second. Do you think it's at all possible for us to get value from data this quickly and be agile if you're not using some form of data ops?
Look, of course you can get value from data without DataOps, because we've been getting value from data for a long time without necessarily DataOps. But we can't deliver continual and repeatable and quicker value from data without DataOps. Of that, I'm 100%. We can't be truly agile on data without DataOps. And what I mean by agile, I mean that that stakeholder, that demanding stakeholder who comes and says, I want these changes and I want them in production and I want them by tomorrow, or by tomorrow, or the next day, and they genuinely mean it, because their dashboard's wrong, or because someone's misinterpreted something that, in terms of an attribute, or someone's counted up what the total customer lifetime value that that needs to be corrected, because they're making fundamental business changes out of that. So
they got a new source of data.
Oh, they've got a new source of data. Oh, look at, we've just had this new source of data, and that needs to be appended in so that we've got this new lifetime value. we can never be as responsive as we need to be and as the business demands us to be without having DataOps. Now that I am 100% clear, and we know that from the customers that we've deployed this to. What we've seen is their business and their stakeholders get what they need faster. Their developers be more productive and deliver more. Like that's the key thing. Their developers out there desperately desiring to meet the needs of business stakeholders, and being hampered because they have to hold their hand up when they can get some time on dev, and they've got to work out which test environment to push to, and they've got to work out whether their change works with somebody else's change. And if all of that mundane process that's been DevOps over the years is not automated, then that's just inertia, delayed time, frustration for developers. And you know what? We take developer productivity very seriously. That is, if we get that one thing right, we make developers more productive. That is the key leading indicator that everything else will work.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. And that's a good lead into one of my final questions here is what's coming in the future here for DataOps Live for the platform? What's going to happen in 2023? Is there anything we can be looking forward to hearing about from you guys?
Look, we've spent the, I suppose 2020 and 21 really getting the fundamentals right in terms of, all of the core capabilities and the whole platform just working and working in a completely rock solid fashion. So Guy has done an amazing job. We've got 3 nines or whatever in terms of availability and all of that sort of stuff. So we really focus on that. The last 12 months, we've really focused on bringing new capability, new enterprise, because we're fundamentally an enterprise platform built for mid-tier corporates and major enterprises like Rush and like other major, 200,000 man organizations around the globe. So we focus on those enterprise features, and just in our last quarter, Thomas Steinborn, who leads our product, he really focused heavily on how do we build engineering scale into the platform. So focus on support for other our new release of our Calibra runner, and our Kubernetes support, and the release of our our cloud development environment, and all of those things. So that's been great. I think we're going to continue that, and we're going to continue the emphasis on supporting data engineering at scale, so that we're not only delivering individual productivity at a developer level, but we're delivering the governance and the control and all of those other elements that the enterprise architects want. Okay, so we're going to focus on that. We're going to continue to focus on, also supporting enterprise architects around the need to maybe separate the management of pipelines around changing infrastructure, which they're very sensitive to. If I want to stand up new data warehouses, or I want to, create new databases and all of those things that require approvals, the separation of those types of pipelines from the pipelines that just run the data flows and just coordinate and orchestrate things. We will never stop our focus on developer productivity. Our goal is to make the most productive developers that there is. So that will continue to be a core focus over this year. I think some of the exciting stuff is we'll have some announcements coming up just now in Q1 around metadata observability. As the orchestrator of all of these different tools and a natural collection point of a lot of metadata, then we'll see unified observability, and not observability in the way that a Monte Carlo with that, because we will take and enrich data from Monte Carlo and give data back to Monte Carlo and Calibra, but a unified approach to how we do that. The clever thing that we'll sort of point out for later on in the year is we'll start to look at how AI can start to help us developing some of this stuff. And so how the employment of AI can maybe make our development processes even faster than they are today.
Oh, that sounds pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's really super exciting.
Look forward to seeing about that and how that works out. So my final question: if you didn't do data, what would you do, Justin? What would you be doing if you weren't in the middle of data?
Well, I've been a serial entrepreneur, so I'm not too sure what I would do if I wasn't doing something in business. The one thing that I've sort of gotten in my nephew's moved over in with us. He's moved over from Ukraine and joined us and grew us. And he's a mechanic. He's been a mechanic since he was the age of 12 with his father, Nikita. And we're starting to do some work around the house with cars. And I've really reinvigorated my love for cars and vehicles and anything that moves, and going out and helping them find cars to buy and to do up. And I think it would be something to do with that. It would be something to do with cars and old classic cars,
Restoration. So restorations,
especially of classics. My dad.
Yeah.
Whenever I grew up from the age of 10, he had old vintage cars like 1912 Daimlers and 1946 Wolseley 12s and Morris Minors and all these cars you would never have heard of in America, but the classics and so yeah, probably something to do with cars and especially classic cars.
Wow, no, that's interesting. So. Yeah, you got to have something other than data, just in case,
Yeah, exactly. Just something to fall back on, So.
Yeah, classic cars is probably good because then when the data infrastructure doesn't work, those cars will still run.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They don't have any there's no chips in those.
There's no chips, no AI, nothing in them. We just got to get the engine oiled, So
that's right. Yeah, very good. All right. Well, thank you so much for being my guest today, Justin, and thanks to our audience for joining. Next week, we're going to be moving our live streams from Monday to Wednesday and a little earlier in the day so that our viewers in the UK aren't having to, and our guests like Justin aren't having to get on so late in the day. So we're going to be going Wednesday and earlier, and you'll see that on all the LinkedIn events going forward. So, but be sure to come back again next Wednesday. I'll have Justin back again, along with Guy Adams, who we mentioned earlier, who's the CTO of DataOps.live, and they're going to join me to give us their predictions on what's going to happen in the DataOps space for 2023. So this is, we're going to do some visioning here and see what do we think is going to happen this year in this space and in the world of true data ops. So be sure to join us then. And if you can't join us live, you can always watch us on the replay. So thanks again, everyone, and happy 2023.
Happy 2023. Thanks, Kent.